Pete Hegseth is easily the worst of Donald Trump's cabinet secretaries, which is why it makes so much sense that he's been having the worst time lately, appearing before Congress week after week to be shredded to his face, being reamed out by Donald Trump as well for his failed military parade, and being called out to his face today by Senator Elizabeth Warren in such a forceful display that he crumbled, screamed, and fell apart. We're going to get into it all, and then we are going to speak to a different Senator Peter Welch, about how Democrats are opposing Donald Trump's budget. But first, I want to start with Senator Warren grilling Pete Hegseth.
President Trump has deployed the National Guard and then the U.S. Marines to Los Angeles over the objections of state and local officials, saying that the troops are needed to support immigration detention operations that are being carried out by ICE. On Sunday night, the president threatened to deploy ICE agents to other cities around the country that he sees as, quote, the core of the Democrat power center, end quote, specifically mentioning Chicago and New York. Secretary Hegseth, if the president wanted to deploy Marines to Chicago and New York City like he did in Los Angeles, would you carry out that order even if the local governors and mayors objected?
Well, Senator, because Governor Newsom was unwilling to address
that's not
protecting federal law enforcement agents in Los Angeles, President Trump had all the authorities, and the Defense Department happily supported defending our ICE agents in the conduct of their job. They have the right, as Americans, to be able to do their job without being attacked by mobs. And we will protect them in that process. And if other states needed it, we would provide that.
I know that you heard my question. So you would be willing to send troops if the president ordered it to Chicago, New York City? That's right.
Well, thankfully, New York City, unlike California, unlike Gavin Newsom, is willing to step up and address the issue with their local law enforcement.
I will take that as a yes. How about if the president says he wants to send troops to 15 cities? Would you be willing to do that?
Senator, I don't accept your hypothetical because it's
hypothetical.
Not a real
That's
one.
the question. You're the Secretary of Defense. Would you send troops to 15 cities if the president said do it? Would you do it? 15 cities.
Again, Senator, it's a complete hypothetical lacking any context at all.
You're the Secretary
and I refuse
of
to
Defense.
box myself in based on questioning on a hypothetical.
But you're here asking for $1 trillion, and I want to know how you're going to spend it. And so my question is, if Donald Trump tells you to send troops to 15 American cities, are you going to spend the money and send the troops?
Thankfully, we're spending money on securing our southern border, a way the previous administration abandoned and allowed 21 million illegals to enter our country. So defending our homeland is a real serious priority under this administration, and we're doing it.
I understand the question about defense. Secretary Hegseth, about 4,000 National Guard troops and 700 Marines have been sent to L.A. Is there a number of troops deployed to American cities over the objections of governors and mayors at which you would be concerned that we are undermining our national defense?
Senator, we've spent 2 decades guarding other people's borders. We think at the Defense Department it's about time we shore up ours.
So that's my question. Is there a number at which sending those troops to Los Angeles or Chicago or New York starts to undermine our ability to defend ourselves around the globe? Is there a number?
Senator, we look at capabilities and readiness around the globe all the time, and we're quite satisfied with our capabilities to defend the homeland, and we'll provide more if and when it's necessary.
So you are satisfied with our capabilities. Let me just ask, have you actually done the analysis and figured out how many troops you can deploy domestically before you start to undermine readiness around the world? Have you done that analysis?
Yes, ma'am.
Then would you let the rest of us in on it? We are the Senate Armed Services Committee, and you're here to ask for $1 trillion. What's the number?
We've got contingencies and plans for any number of capabilities should governors be unable, as Gavin Newsom has been, to actually secure his own federal agents in their cities.
How many troops can you deploy domestically before you start to cut into our readiness internationally?
As I said, previous administrations deployed our National Guard all around the globe in numbers
I have a
far
number,
beyond
but
what we
you're
were capable
just
of
not gonna
supporting.
tell
So
us.
limited
So let me
contingencies
ask you
inside the
one
United
more
States to
question.
protect federal law
If the Supreme
enforcement is
Court orders
doable.
you to remove troops from American city streets, will you do so?
Can you repeat the question, please?
Yes, if the Supreme Court orders you to remove troops from American cities, will you do so?
As I've said, Senator, I don't believe district courts should determine national security policy, but if the
That was
Supreme
not my
Court rules
question.
on a topic, we will abide by that.
Okay. You know, during her press conference last week, Secretary Noem said, "We are staying here to liberate the city from its mayor and its governor, people who were elected by a majority of voters." Secretary Hegseth is saying he is ready to deploy more troops and won't tell us what the implications are for our national defense. This is un-American and it makes us unsafe. I wish our Republican colleagues would speak up.
This is exactly how we need to present Donald Trump and his cabinet officials. These are people, through their ignorance, inexperience, and loyalty to Donald Trump, that are putting an imposition on your life. Pete Hegseth's inability to do his job is costing you your tax dollars. His loyalty to Donald Trump is putting us at risk. Donald Trump's insane posting not only is leading us to a recession, but is throwing the world into chaos as war erupts. This is how we have to address what is happening in this administration and call out the real impact that they are having on our lives. And nowhere is that clearer than in Donald Trump's budget, which I spoke to Senator Peter Welch about. And I hope you stick around for that whole conversation because we broke a little news at the end. Senator, thank you so much for joining me today, and thank you for being so outspoken against your Republican colleagues who seem so happy to go along with Donald Trump's plan, which runs completely counter to what he promised on the campaign trail, lowering costs, but now he's raising them by kicking 16 million people off of their health care, millions more, removing their SNAP benefits. What do we have to do right now to message towards the American people and your Republican colleagues to try to prevent this bill from going forward?
Well, to message the bill is just to describe accurately what the bill does, because people come to their own conclusion. The pain that is inflicted by this legislation is bipartisan. And you could have voted for Trump, you could have voted for Harris. But if you're on Medicaid and you lose it, you're hurting. If you're a family that gets food stamps, SNAP benefits, and you get those taken away, you're going to really hurt. And by the way, it's not just the individual recipients who are hurt. Healthcare, 2 out of 3 seniors who are in nursing homes is paid for by Medicaid. Families with a disabled child, the only way they can keep it together and take care of that child is with Medicaid. Mm-hmm. So the pain is really immense. But beyond just the families, you take that Medicaid away, billions of dollars, 16 billion or $700 billion in Medicaid. That's money that would have gone to community hospitals. Mm-hmm. All of them in every part of the country are on financial fingernail. They're very tight. That money comes out, those hospitals are in danger of going under, and that's real. So you're going to hurt these community institutions, you're going to hurt jobs, as well as hurt individuals. And as far as my Republican colleagues, the bottom line, my approach to them, because we need 4 votes in the Senate from our Republican colleagues, is first to talk to them about, hey, how's this going to affect folks you represent? Mm-hmm. How's it going to affect your community hospitals? And then second, try to get them thinking, do they want to pay attention to the needs of the people they represent, or do they want to live in constant fear of Trump?
Yeah, and it seems like a lot of them are leaning towards the constant fear of Trump. And it's not just the attacks on our healthcare. We see Donald Trump, really the ethos of this administration. And it started out for me, the Russ Vought quote that seems to be all throughout Project 2025 is he wants federal workers to feel traumatized, right? And he wants us to feel the same way about our government, that it can't work, that it's broken. And we see this with Donald Trump's attack on FEMA as he takes $300 million worth of funding to go play golf with, but he wants to attack our government and say it's broken. How do we as Democrats message against that at the same time as we outline what is broken about government, but what can be fixed? How do we present the more aspirational vision?
Well, first of all, there's 2 things. what you just outlined is embedded in the cruelty with which these Trump policies are being imposed. And I think hopefully that's going to start to derail it. Because, folks who get fired, they just get an email, wake up in the morning, before they even have a cup of coffee, they're told they've been working someplace for 20 years. They're fired for, quote, poor performance, or the way they're taking away Medicaid. So there's a real cruelty here that is part of the implementation of these policies. So the two steps for us in messaging are, one, to expose the reality of what's happening and make it real for individuals, and then what it means on the economy. And the second is, we've got to own the obligation to build our own trust by talking in a straightforward way with people, by having a positive vision about where we want to go. And a lot of that is about creating opportunity for people to get ahead. I mean, it really has been tough for people who are living paycheck to paycheck to have confidence that they're going to be able to boost themselves up and have some economic security. My view here is that Trump actually did tap into a real economic anxiety that a lot of Americans feel. But what he's proposing will make it worse, not better. So my view, we have to acknowledge the economic insecurities, the kind of irritation people have with government that goes too slow, doesn't get things done, and then show with our energy that we're committed to making things better.
Yeah, and of course, it wasn't just Trump, but Elon who were trying to tap into that and how people feel towards what is truly, there are some wasteful spending in the government. But of course, his effort wasn't actually to undertake that. It was to go after any agency looking to hold him accountable. But he did create some pretty positive press, at least there in the beginning, when talking about government reform. What can be our version of that that doesn't end with, someone getting fired from the government in shame and then attacking Democrats on their way out with their tail between their legs? What can be our version of, here is the aspirational vision that Democrats are putting forth? Because it is a problem with our branding right now that we don't have one.
Well, that really good question. Let me give an example. The Federal Emergency Management Authority. We had a lot of engagement with them because we had bad floods in Vermont in July 23 and July 24. The Musk approach is to abolish the agency, where the Musk approach is to get a head count and then every third or fourth person send them an email and tell them they're fired. It's not to look at the program, how it's working, and how you can make it achieve its objectives in a more efficient way. All right. So it's not on the level of waste, fraud, and abuse. Do you know anybody who's in favor of waste, fraud, and abuse? So we have to expose that they're just trying to destroy it. Our approach, like say with FEMA, my experience is you've got to have some federal involvement in the immediate aftermath of a big storm.
Yeah.
That is beyond anybody's control, and there, but for the grace of God, go you. On the other hand, FEMA's been good in the immediate response, but as you are doing the recovery and it takes a year or year and a half, there should be much more local control, where the local select board is figuring out whether they need a 10-inch or a 20-inch culvert, where they can prioritize which bridge over which river they want to repair sooner rather than later. So having that authority transferred much more to the local level would be a reform I think would make a huge difference. And if it's then effective and people in that community see, hey, it's our local folks getting involved in making decisions and acting, getting it done, then I think you can start restoring confidence that we are committed to being effective and efficient and showing up when you do need federal help.
Yeah, and that idea of being more efficient by delegating to these local authorities runs, you would say, in parallel with what Republicans espouse that they care about, this, states' rights claim, and we have to call it a claim because it's just not true, that they've been pushing for so long. But then we look at the state of California, and what rights does Gavin Newsom have as Donald Trump launches a full-fledged assault on the people of Los Angeles? And I wanted to bring this up, and I may go on a bit of a rant here, but I promise it's going to end somewhere that makes sense. But I think you were the first senator, or really elected Democrat, to go and speak to one of the protesters. I'm a Columbia graduate who had been detained in Mohsen Madoui, and you made it clear that Donald Trump is trying to make this an issue, make this a wedge because he thinks Democrats won't speak up. And a lot of Democrats didn't, or said that we shouldn't because they thought, well, maybe this isn't the best political issue for us. But Donald Trump deciding he can detain, arrest, and deport anyone without due process is a matter of civil and human rights. We can't allow him to just trample over those. And I see a lot of that in California right now, where a lot of elected Democrats, we've seen Senator Fetterman say, well, we don't need to be speaking about this at all. Just move on. Right. But I think we do need to be connecting the righteous indignation that people feel towards Donald Trump's assault on this community to what he's doing in his budget. So I know that was kind of a lot, but how do we make sure that we focus on the things that people are feeling, the pain that they're feeling in their communities, and not ignore it at the same time as we're able to talk about the really deeply disturbing legislation, not just try to break them up into two separate issues, but make it one thing?
You know, the most, you mentioned Mosen, who of course was a Columbia student, and by the way, just graduated. He got arrested when he was showing up at his citizenship hearing. He's been here for 11 years legally, and he goes to take a citizen test. He passes it, and then the tester leaves the room, and ICE comes in, puts him in handcuffs, and they try to get him to Louisiana. I did visit him in prison. He got picked up and detained, not because of anything he did. There was no accusation of any crime. It's because of what he said. You know, he expressed his opposition to what's going on in Gaza. And you cannot have your free speech rights taken away. So that's a principle. Another principle is due process. And I think all of us Americans have to defend those rights that we have and have made the freedom that we have in this country something we can hold on to. You know, the second thing, though, is we can't be afraid of calling out Trump and defining what it is he's really doing as opposed to what he's claiming to be doing. I mean, it's not on the level what he's doing in LA, okay? What he's doing is using his hostility to immigration in a go-to political issue for him to try to stoke up anger against all of us and support in his base. So, you know, he had the southern border. That's an issue that we have to deal with. The country has to have a secure border. Then there's the criminals. It's true, there are some criminals, and should they be deported or not with hearings? Yes. But now he's going into mass deportation policy, where in the case of Vermont, going on farms and taking away labor, so we're not going to be able to milk our cows. He's doing the same thing with Dreamers. And these folks that he's rounding up now are all to meet a quota and to meet the political agenda of President Trump. So defining that, and that's what we're against, and that's why people are demonstrating. We've got to name what he's doing and defend our right to express our opposition.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I feel like sometimes, although it is so important that we focus on this budget because it could be just the most destructive piece of legislation we've seen passed in either of the Trump administrations, we also have to make sure we're meeting people where they are in their rightful outrage. You are doing that on both issues, Senator. I really appreciate you, and I really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you. It's really good to be with you.